Tonight's first order of business, while Canadians fret about an anemic economic outlook at home, there is some reason for optimism. Our neighbour to the south is showing numbers that, if borne out with real economic growth, bode well for Canada. The story isn't perfect, and there are still reasons to worry the U.S. could hit a speed bump. But for now, we're seeing this glass as half full. Welcome to The Exchange. Well, just as Canadians get used to the idea that we were in a recession in the first half of the year, the U.S. economy appears to be flexing its muscles. According to new data, worker productivity surged 3.3% in second quarter, the fastest pace since 2013. Productivity is one of the most important measures of economic growth and future prosperity, since it measures output per worker. By many other measures, that economy is firing on all cylinders. A private survey of the job market shows the country added 190,000 jobs in August, up from 177,000 created in July, a sign employers shrugged off some recent market turmoil. Americans continue to make more and spend more. Consumption was up 0.3% in July, incomes up 0.4%. Yesterday alone, we learned construction spending jumped nearly 14% from last year. That's the highest since 2008. And auto sales in August were the strongest in 10 years. In second quarter, the economy grew at a 3.7% annual pace. The question is, though, how long can the U.S. thrive when it appears the rest of the world is struggling, particularly here at home? Canada is the U.S.'s largest export market, accounting for 19% of its exports. Mexico's second at 16%. China, for all the attention it gets, a 7% share. As we found out yesterday, this country was in a recession in the beginning of the year. Demand for U.S. goods is already waning. Exports to Canada fell nearly a full percentage point in June. And a financial crisis has gripped China, another strong trading partner. A string of reports show that the world's second largest economy is slowing. That's put investors around the world, of course, on edge and concerns about risk of contagion. China has contributed more to the global economy than the U.S. in the past decade. Look closely, and some cracks may be starting to appear in the U.S. economy, though. Factory orders fell 14.7% in July compared to last year. It's the 9th straight month of year-over-year declines, and that's something that hasn't happened since the last recession. In August, growth in the manufacturing sector slowed to its weakest pace in more than 2 years, and U.S. stocks just suffered their worst month in more than 3 years. Bricklin Dwyer is a senior economist with BNP Paribas here for his take. Thanks for joining us, Bricklin.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with, I actually want to start with your view of the U.S. economy. We did get some good numbers today. I mean, that productivity number alone, income and spending. The factory orders number is something that people were highlighting as real concern. Where do you come down on how optimistic you are about the American economy?
Yeah, we're reasonably optimistic. Today's data, I think, highlighted that Q2 growth was pretty solid, much better than most people were expecting, as you mentioned, about 3.7%. It looks like quite a bit of that came from productivity, although we like to smooth out that number, and productivity in the U.S. has actually been kind of a weak spot. We've seen about flat productivity for the past year, so a bit of a rebound happening there, kind of normalizing things out a bit. But for second half of this year, we're thinking that things kind of normalize. We get to about a 2.5% pace by year end, something like that, which is pretty reasonable looking at that in comparison to Canada, of course. And
as you noted in a research note, we've got a very symbiotic relationship, and Canada is important to the U.S. In terms of our trading relationship. What does it mean for the American economy that we are in recession, or have been in recession, and may still be?
Well, that's what's really interesting, because most people think about Canada being so dependent on the U.S. in terms of trade, and certainly with 75% of exports going to the U.S. market, there is a tremendous level of dependency there. But it also works the other way too. The U.S. isn't really that open of an economy, and a large portion, about 20% of our exports, do go to Canada. So when Canada hurts, it hurts us too. So right now, the U.S., the outlook for the U.S. Is being impaired by Canada's lackluster growth, or H1's recession.
So when we look at the difference, though, between the two economies, one really is struck. We did take quite a different approach to fiscal stimulus and monetary stimulus post-credit crisis. We, in this country, were very intent on withdrawing most of that stimulus. You guys have not. Is that the kind of secret sauce that's keeping the U.S. going when it seems like every other major economy is really sputtering?
Well, I mean, certainly the U.S. Implemented a lot of stimulus, and I would argue that quite a bit of that has been taken away. I mean, we used to run fiscal deficits here close to 10% of GDP. Now they're closer to 2%. So that's a significant cutback in terms of spending. But, we're not as conservative as the Canadian government, which has, come close to balancing their budget. So that's a much more significant level of the deficit or the budget right now. But in terms of delta or change in the kind of programs that we've implemented in the U.S., they've actually gone quite a bit further. So I don't think that's really at the heart of what's happening. I think it's, just kind of we experienced a massive recession here. We had a tremendous amount of monetary policy response where the Fed lowered rates to zero. They implemented $4.5 trillion worth of QE. And it took a long time for the rest of the economy to kind of pull itself together and the housing market to recover. Now we've started to see some of those benefits really get borne out. So we're seeing some fairly steady growth in terms of what's happening in the U.S.
So when you talk about the kind of reliance of the U.S. on our economy, as well as obviously we talk a lot about our reliance on your economy, could it be that we drag you down rather than you dragging us up, as we were so hoping?
Well, unfortunately, we look abroad for, some of our growth, and that means that, what happens in the rest of the world matters to us, although it matters to us less than most economies. And the rest of the world really isn't looking that great. Canada obviously being the clear example where we have a recession in the first half of the year. That's going to hurt exports for the first half of the year in the U.S. and obviously have implications for the second half too. But the rest of the world isn't exactly picking up the slack. We've seen downward adjustments to growth expectations in just about every economy in the world right now. So that's going to mean, lower exports in the U.S. and, less prosperity or less good stuff happening in the U.S. for the second half of the year.
All right. We got to leave it there, Bricklin. Hope we talk again soon.